What's up, guys? This is Christian Brindle with Six Figure Medicare Agent. Hope this video finds you doing well. Happy New Year. Happy 2021. And before I get into this webinar that I did live in our group in Six Figure Medicare Agent on Medicare Advantage and Part D prescription drug plan election periods, I want to first talk to you about my favorite telemarketing lead company, and that is Lead Heroes, guys. Lead Heroes has you covered when it comes to Medicare supplement, turning 65, final expense, mortgage protection, and a litany of different kind of products that you can possibly sell to people in the telemarketing lead space. They can do custom calling campaigns to where they can actually pre-schedule appointments for you to either talk to people over the phone or show up at the house. They can do live transfer leads, anything that you can possibly need, they got you covered. They master the telemarketing space unlike anyone I've personally seen before. Just because you watch this video today, there's going to be 10% off coupon available for you, available at checkout down in the link in the description, and there's going to be the coupon code right next to that link to the Lead Heroes website. Try them out in 2021. We use them like crazy. Encourage you to give them a shot. Enjoy the video. Are we live? Are we live? Are we live? I think we're live. I think we're live. I think we're live. What's up, guys? What is up? Hang on here, just getting a couple of things situated for you guys. Okay. All right. Happy New Year. My friends, my brothers, my sisters, my in-betweens, if there's any of those. Just kidding, of course. Inappropriate joke. Hi, guys. Happy New Year. I had put a post out that I would be willing to do a Medicare Advantage election period webinar before Christmas. I didn't get enough likes on the post, so I didn't do it before Christmas, but that doesn't mean I wasn't willing to do it. I'm more than happy to do it. This is going to be recorded, this webinar, and it's going to go up on the Six Figure Medicare Agent YouTube channel, but I thought it'd be fun to just kind of live stream it here in the group. Done things like this before, enjoyed it. Did like a pre-AEP webinar kind of like this, kind of give my thoughts on kind of what you can do to have a great AEP right before AEP. So I thought this would be kind of a fun thing to kind of do. And without further ado, guys, let's just get right into it and let's talk about election periods and kind of what you need to know and kind of how they work. So without further ado, let's jump into it. So I've always really enjoyed the United Healthcare election period booklets. Yes, I know this is the 2019-2020 book. I really just don't feel like hunting down the 2020-2021 book on Jarvis. And you can find these books, by the way, in Jarvis. I always have felt like they've done such a phenomenal job of essentially really kind of laying it down and putting it in a way that agents can easily understand. And there's really not much differences. If I see any inconsistencies with how things are now as I go through this book, I will point it out for you, but not a whole lot of differences. So that's why I'm using this one. This one was up in a file, uploaded as a file in the group. So if you do want to access to this particular document, you can find it in the files section of this group of Six Figure Medicare Agent. So let's talk, guys. So a lot of times, new agents that come into the business, they don't quite understand election periods. Like they don't understand what IEP is. They don't understand what an SEP is, what SEPs exist out there. When can you do them? How far out can you do them? We're going to talk about all of that. So a good place, I believe, to start in this particular webinar would be probably AEP. So with AEP, that is obviously the one that we just got done with. It's pretty self-explanatory. And they spell it out here pretty good, pretty easy to understand. During AEP, consumers can make a new plan choice. Any type of plan can be selected. So what they mean by that is you can go from a Medicare Advantage plan to a Part D prescription drug plan, or you can go from a Part D prescription drug plan to a Medicare Advantage plan, or you can go from a Part D plan to another Part D plan, or you can go from a Medicare Advantage plan to another Medicare Advantage plan. Capiche? That's pretty easy. Goes from October 15th through December 7th. And the new plan takes effect the first of the year. Now, this is a big misconception about election periods in general. if the plan has not taken effect yet, so this would apply to IEP, a majority of SEPs, ICEP. If someone puts an app in, let's say, and it's for, let's say, effective date 2 months out, and you come in and you put an app in, and the old plan hasn't gone into effect yet, the election hasn't been used. What I mean by that is when the plan goes into effect, the election that person has available to them has been used. This is a big misconception. So like when someone's turned 65, I've done this so many times over the years, and a lot of agents don't feel like they feel like they can't do anything if an application is put in for like an IEP, and we'll talk about that in a second, but that's not necessarily the case. AEP is last app in, right? Because after December 7th, last app in, right? But a lot of election periods work that way if the plan hasn't gone into effect yet. We'll talk about that in a second, but the last app in, person can sign up for a new plan every day of AEP if they want to. The last one they enroll into is the one that will go into effect starting on January 1st of the upcoming year. It's pretty self-explanatory is AEP. I'm not going to spend too much time on that. The Medicare Advantage OEP. Now, there were some questions that were asked about this in the group. I know that, Amanda Cameron did a great job of kind of posting what the AHIP says about it. It's pretty self-explanatory as well. It's not exactly the same as AEP. Can't do all of the exact same things that you can do during AEP, but this is a good way. I like how United breaks it down. And Humana has a document that's similar to this for those of you who might be interested. So during OEP stands for open enrollment period, whereas AEP stands for annual election period. So for OEP, it takes place from January 1st through March 31st. And essentially what it's designed for is it's designed for people that have Medicare Advantage plans, and they're going to be either changing to another Medicare Advantage plan or to original Medicare, with or without a standalone prescription drug plan. So the way they word it is during OEP, Medicare Advantage plan members may have an opportunity from January 1st through March 31st to switch MA plans with or without drug coverage, or to disenroll from an MA plan and obtain coverage through original Medicare with or without a standalone Part D plan. Members enrolled in a standalone Part D plan are not eligible for an open enrollment period election because the OEP is only available for those enrolled in an MA plan. It's pretty self-explanatory, really. If you have an Advantage plan, or if your client has an Advantage plan and you would like to change them, or they would like to change to another Medicare Advantage plan, they like to go to original Medicare with or without a drug plan, they can do that. Essentially, they have one election, and we'll get to that a little bit later, but they get one election, meaning that once this is put into motion and once it goes into effect, their election period is used. It's a one election code. So essentially, my friends, what you're looking at there is when you make a change during OEP, let's say you make it in January, the change will take effect the first of the upcoming month. So if you make a change in January, the change will take effect February 1st. Pretty self-explanatory. It's mainly for Medicare Advantage members that want to make some kind of change. They can make one change. Once they've made that change, let's say they change in January, takes effect February 1st, and they want to change again in February, they're out of luck unless they have another election period. All right, so moving on up. Then we have our MA OEP new. So this is kind of an interesting one that not a lot of people know about. It's essentially from January 1st to December 31st. This is how United Healthcare explains this one. Newly eligible customers who enroll in an MA plan during their IEP, which stands for Initial Election Period, or ICEP, can use an MA OEP newly eligible, but only during their first 3 months after they start their Part A and B. So essentially, the way that works is if, let's say, someone's turning 65, they use their IEP to sign up for a Medicare Advantage plan, and they change their mind and they want to get out of it. Well, in the first 3 months of the start dates of their Part A and Part B, they can essentially change their mind. That's what that is. Because they can't use their IEP to change it, because once they've used their IEP to enroll into the plan in the first place, the IEP election period is used up. This gives them a little bit of wiggle room for that, which is good. I think that's a good thing. We'll talk about that a little bit more later. Special election periods, there's a lot of different special election periods. But essentially, in layman's terms, a special election period is a life-changing event, special enrollment period, special election period, to where they can change their plan outside of any enrollment period, outside of OEP, outside of AEP, if they meet certain parameters. We'll talk about that. IEP, ICEP seems to be a hard thing at the beginning for some new agents to grasp, so I wanted to go over this a little bit. Let's start with IEP. So qualifying members will have a 7-month window to enroll. 3 months prior, the month of, and 3 months after the start dates of their Parts A and B eligibility, or the month they turn 65, or date of disability if prior to turn 65, right, if they're on Medicare disability. If a qualifying member delays enrollment in Part B, they will only have 3 months prior. So essentially what that means is IEP is when the person is first getting onto Medicare, either through disability or turning 65 for A and B. One of those two scenarios. They'll have a 7-month window, 3 months before the effective date, the month of, and 3 months after. They can choose to enroll at that point. It's a one-time used election period. So what I mean by that is if they enroll into a Medicare Advantage plan and it starts, let's say, the month they turn 65 and that month comes and goes, even if they're in their 7-month window, they've used their IEP up. They're done. They can't use the IEP to change again. Now, they could use something like MA OEP new, like we talked about a second ago, but they couldn't use the IEP a second time. They couldn't use it again. Now, for ICEP, what that is that's for people that essentially have turned 65. Let's say they're continued to work, and they postpone their Part B. Let's say they took A at 65, but they've decided to postpone their Part B. They're on their work insurance, right? It's cheaper, whatever the case might be. That's a little different. They don't have the full 7-month window. They have 3 months prior to the Part B start date. If the Part B start date comes and goes, they can't use the ICEP anymore. Capiche? Let's keep moving. So guys, here's some examples that I like that they do this. I like that they have these examples. So I'm going to read through that. This is an OEP example, an MA OEP example. So Maria enrolled in an MA plan with an effective date of January 1st. In February, she calls her agent to ask about switching to an MAPD plan. Josh determines that Maria is eligible to make a one-time change, right? Like I said, one time during MA OEP because she has been in her current MA plan since January or earlier. Maria's effective date in her new MAPD plan would be March 1st. Maria's election period is MA OEP. Okay, so that's what we're looking at. She enrolls in February. The change takes effect the first of the upcoming month. Once the new plan goes into effect, that election period is used up. MA OEP versus OEP new. I think we talked about that quite a bit already. I'm just going to move on. Kind of wanted to get into the IEP, ICEP stuff, and then also some other things. Okay, so here's an example for IEP, ICEP. Okay, so Jim turned 65 in April 2018, right? This is a little bit of an older book, but the rules haven't changed in this. He decided he didn't want Part B and was going to continue working another year. This is for ICEP. Delayed their Part B because they were working. Jim enrolled in Part B effective April 1st, 2019. During his ICEP delayed Part B, Jim enrolled in an MAPD plan effective April 1st, the same day that his Part B starts. With ICEP, they cannot use the election period after the Part B effective date. It's now June 2019, and Jim wants to change plans. He can use OEP new. Well, yeah, you can use OEP new, but you can't do it because of ICEP, is what I'm getting at. You can't use that same election period. If you put down the wrong election period on an application, typically it will get denied. So that's kind of an example of an ICEP situation. Here's some more initial election period examples, IEPs. So from January through March, okay, so Antonio's turning 65 in April and decides to enroll in both Medicare Parts A and B at this time. From January through March, Antonio can enroll with an effective date of April 1st, right? So 90 days out. In April, Antonio turns 65. He's eligible for Part A and B. From April through July, Antonio can enroll with an effective date that is the first month of the following of the election period. So seven-month window for that. What is IEP2? IEP2 is another commonly used election period, maybe not as common as an IEP or an ICEP, but fairly common. IEP2 essentially is when somebody was eligible for Medicare prior to turning 65 because of Medicare disability. So they've already used their IEP up. IEP does not necessarily when the person turns 65. It's the first time they get on A and B. First time. But IEP2 is used when they're on Medicare disability. They started their A and B. Let's say they started at 50, right? So this is a good example. Sally was eligible for Medicare Parts A and B due to disability at age 50. And then Sally's turned 65 in April. So she's been on Medicare for 15 years in this particular scenario. From January through March, Sally can enroll in or change MAPD or PDP plans with an effective date of April 1st. So IEP essentially gives them another election period when they turn 65 to which they can make a change. Sally can enroll in or change an MAPD or PDP plan at any time in a 7-month window. So it's also a 7-month window, similar to the first IEP. IEP2 is used when they were eligible for Medicare before due to disability and they're turning 65. They have that election period even though they're not new to Medicare. It's IEP2. So that's a good one to know about. Talked about ICEP, I think a good amount. Let's talk about SEPs, my friends. Let's talk about dual SEPs, LIS SEPs. So here's an example. So duals is essentially where someone qualifies for LIS, low income subsidy, extra help from their particular state. They might not qualify for Medicaid, but they're going to qualify for LIS. And they can essentially make changes any time of the year, one time per quarter. For the first 3 quarters of the year, the fourth quarter is a lockout time. They can't do it until the next year. If they have Medicaid, the same thing. It's a dual SEP. So United explains it as Diane is enrolled in United Healthcare D-SNP plan, dual special needs plan for those of you who don't know, effective January 1st, 2019. In June 2019, she decides to change to a different United Healthcare D-SNP plan with no change in status or maintaining status. Diane qualifies to change her plan anytime during the second calendar quarter, April through May through June, as she has not changed plans with the second calendar quarter. The quarter is used on a month the application was written, not on the plan effective date. So that's pretty simple, right? They can change one time per quarter due to their LIS maintaining status or Medicaid maintaining status, which essentially if you have Medicaid, you have LIS automatically. And so those people can change. So that's why you always hear people saying that, outside of AEP, a lot of agents will target low income LIS dual people because they can change them outside of AEP or OEP. And they can do a change one time per quarter. So if they've used up that change, they have to wait till the next quarter to make another change. Used to be years ago when I came into the business that you could do this, you could make that change every month if you wanted to, if you were a Medicaid person. And glad they kind of tightened the screws a little bit on that over the years. So let's keep going. Let's talk about, I don't want to get into too much of the duals because it's pretty self-explanatory in my personal opinion. This one's kind of interesting. SEP retro end-stage renal disease determination example. Don't know how relevant this one is, but we'll use it anyway. We'll say Steve is enrolled in a United Healthcare commercial plan effective April 1st, 2013. Steve develops end-stage renal disease while enrolled in his current plan on June 1st, 2019. CMS determines that Steve was entitled to A and B effective November 1st, 2018. Election period begins the month Steve received notice of the entitlement and ends 2 months later. Steve can enroll with an effective date that is the first of the month following the month of election. Steve can enroll in an MA/MAPD product at any time during this 3-month time frame using an SEP retro end-stage renal disease determination. That's kind of to protect people. I don't even know how relevant that one is anymore because end-stage renal disease isn't even a health question anymore. Someone probably can correct me on that. So if someone's coming off a group plan, let's say they got onto A and B for some reason when they turned 65 and they still continue to work. They kept their group plan and had Medicare and their group plan at the same time. And that does happen from time to time. Well, there's an SEP for them coming off of their group plan. That would be loss of employer group health plan. That would be when the ICEP doesn't affect them in this particular scenario, because they already signed up for A and B at 65. Let's say they're 68 now, and they're retiring, coming off the group plan. That would be essentially used for that. So an example would be, in June, Manny, who is 72 years old, notifies his employer that he will retire in January. Manny will sign up for Part B 3 months prior to his retirement. And his employer informs him that they allow enrollment changes. That's a big thing too. They have to be able to, has to work out. In January, Manny is dissatisfied with the plan choice. Manny decided to submit a new application using loss of employer group health coverage. So essentially, that's typically, you want that the effective date to begin the first, like let's say, for example, let's say someone's retiring at the end of February, last day of February, and that's when their insurance ends too. You'd want their new plan to begin the 1st of March. That's pretty self-explanatory. Let's keep going. Let's keep going. Let's keep going. SEP change of residence. So if somebody lives in a service area, we all know that Medicare Advantage plans and also Part D prescription drug plans are built for specific service areas. And when I say service areas, it doesn't necessarily even mean all the entire state that the person lives in. Most states, from one end of the state to the other, have different plans made for them. So in Florida, a person that lives in Miami does not have access to necessarily all the same plans as a person in Jacksonville or Tampa Bay or Orlando, et cetera, et cetera. Same thing goes for big states like California, Texas, even in my state, in Utah. In Salt Lake City, there's completely different plans available than are in southern Utah, like a St. George area, for the most part. There are some plans that overlap, but very few. And so if somebody moves out of their service area, they could move from one end of the state to the other where their plan is not offered in the new county they're moving to, or they could just move out of the state altogether. They're granted a special enrollment period called change of residence where they can essentially make a change. So an example is for Charles. In May, Charles notifies United Healthcare that he is moving to a new address June 18th. His election period will begin in May because it's prior. He can make preparations for that move. If Charles hasn't notified United Healthcare until June, the month of the move, his effective date choices would be the same as above. If Charles hadn't notified United Healthcare until July after his move, his effective date choices would be choice of August 1st, September 1st, or October 1st effective date. 5-star plans. SEPs. So essentially, in some markets, we all know that Medicare Advantage plans have star ratings, right, between 1 and 5 stars. And the star rating determines a lot of things. It determines for the most part, how much funding that the company is going to be getting from CMS year in and year out. And it kind of determines based on a lot of things. It's based on, provider experiences, customer experiences, a lot of different things. And so if there's a 5-star plan, and then there's so many markets that don't have any 5-star plans altogether, but if there is a 5-star plan, people can change from one Medicare Advantage plan to a 5-star plan essentially all year round, and they can do that one time. So if there's multiple 5-star plans in a market, you're not going to see that very often, but if there's multiple 5-star plans in a market, they can do that one time. If they've already done it during that year, use that SEP, they can't use it a second time. So the way that they're going to give an example here for it is Barbara resides in a county where a 5-star Medicare Advantage plan from United Healthcare is available for the 2020 plan year. If Barbara wants to enroll in this 5-star plan, she can submit an application for the plan using a 5-star SEP anytime from December 8th, 2019 through November 30th, 2020 for the next available effective date for the 2020 plan year. So that one's pretty self-explanatory. If you have any 5-star plans in your area, that is an opportunity to write business outside of AEP or OEP. Let's see what else we got. There's some interesting ones here. So here you go. Here's a nice little breakdown of the ones we went over. So we have IEP, ICEP. We know what those are. IEP2, we know what that is. OEP, OEP new, we know what those are. Let's see, what's another one that's kind of interesting that you guys might enjoy? Talked about duals, OEP, institutionalized. Okay, so this one's kind of interesting. So this is for somebody. I'll read the example they give. I am moving into live-in or recently moved out of a long-term care facility, nursing home or long-term care facility, either or. So if somebody was in a long-term care facility and they moved out of it, let's say they went to go live with a family member or something like that, there's a SEP for that, institutionalized. Talked about change of residence. Involuntary loss of coverage, that's kind of like loss of employer group coverage, except for it's not their decision. They might have been canceled or dropped from their employer group coverage. So that's essentially how that's going to work. They gained employer group coverage. So they're gaining employer or union coverage. There's an SEP for that, for both MA and PD. And not all SEPs, by the way, affect both Medicare Advantage and prescription drug plans. So I like how they break it down like this because it's going to show you on each side if it applies. Now, a lot of them do, but there are some that don't. What else we got? Termination of plan contract. Let's say there's a Medicare Advantage plan in a certain market and the insurance company, let's say, pulls out of the county. My plan is ending its contract with Medicare, or Medicare is ending its contract with my plan. And that typically doesn't happen until the end of the year, but a person's granted an SEP and usually it goes past December 7th when they pull out, that they can actually make that change and make a change. So that's important. That's an important one because it does happen in some areas more than others. If somebody belongs to a pharmacy assistance program provided by the state, if your state has that, a program like that, there's an SEP for that. There's a lot of SEPs, guys. There's a lot of freaking SEPs. If somebody lost their Part B coverage, loss of Part D coverage, it's mainly used in this scenario for Part PDPs, not so much for Medicare Advantage. There's a lot of different scenarios, guys, that we can kind of look at here. There's FEMA, natural disaster, weather-related emergency. A lot of times, places that were impacted by hurricanes are granted FEMA SEPs for some time. There was a FEMA SEP code basically given all 50 states for a while this year for COVID. That was able to be used. This is an interesting one too, a trial period, Medigap trial period. So I dropped my Medigap coverage to enroll in an MA/MAPD plan for the first time. I am in my trial period and want to go back to original Medicare. So this is someone tries a Medicare Advantage plan for the first time. Essentially, they dropped a Medigap to move over to that. And they want to go back to the original Medicare model. They can do so within that time period. This is kind of interesting. I was enrolled into a plan by CMS or my state. Usually that's going to happen if somebody qualifies for Medicaid. If they don't enroll into a Part D plan or some kind of prescription drug plan, usually they're going to pick one for them and just enroll them into it. So there's an SEP for that. There's a lot of SEPs, guys, a lot of enrollment periods. It's something that I wanted to just kind of go through mainly. I mean, a lot of you guys that are veteran agents, you know this stuff. This is not really new information for you, but it's always good to kind of know how, why, and how far beforehand and how just the whole thing works. You can write people for Medicare Advantage plans outside of AEP, because I guarantee you, if you're not up to speed on a lot of these election periods and a lot of these enrollment periods, that you're probably leaving business on the table every year because you're having people approach you that might qualify for an SEP. You might not know it. And you turn them away and say, I can't help you. And it's outside of open enrollment or something like that. You don't want to be in that situation. You want to know every scenario that you can possibly know about to which you can write somebody due to a special enrollment period. So anyway, guys, just a little quick thing here. We're going to have the replay up on the YouTube channel. So if you want to watch that, watch for it next week. We'll have it up there. And hope you enjoyed this. If you did, please do me a favor, like it, drop a comment. Let me know if I missed any important ones. I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts. And let me know if this was helpful. Again, it's New Year's Eve, so Happy New Year. and appreciate all you guys and all your support and activity here in the group and the community. Adios.